Rock and roll is an avant-garde art in Liyue Harbor, and Xinyan is the pioneer in this field. She rebels against ossified prejudices, using her music and passionate singing to awaken dazed souls fatigued by worldly matters. Every night, she will sling on the instrument that she made herself, stand on a self-constructed stage, and play self-composed tunes to every member of the audience. As the person is, so are her songs to be bold, defiant, loud, and proud. If you ever get the chance, do not miss out on her next performance. Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Clementine and welcome to this remake of Xinyan's Character Tales episode. We posted this video back in June of 2021 and we talked about Xinyan's backstory and real-life inspirations. Back then, she was dubbed as one of the most forgotten characters in Genshin Impact. However, after her appearance in a limited event with Child and many more after that, it's great that the developers are giving Xinyan more screen time. As a Xinyan main, it's honestly pretty heartwarming that we're finally seeing her in quests after being absent for a long time. In the past video, we've made some errors that will be corrected in this remake, added with some analysis about her character design, her instrument, and some thoughts about her appearances during these past events. Now for those who still don't know who Xinyan is, don't worry, we'll fill you up with her story and fun interactions with the other Liyuean characters. Having to waste no more time, let's jump right in. As a context for her character, we have to go back to her past and how she started her career as a rock and roll musician. She once came from a poor family with meager food and crumped up space for shelter, adding to the fact that living in Liyue is expensive and the food there is costly too. So when she was born, her parents placed a lot of pressure on her, giving her the best of what little they had, in the hopes that she would be able to rise to become a phoenix. As a result, this puts a huge pressure on Xinyan's part. However, things didn't go as planned, as Xinyan struggled with any of the feminine arts learned in Liyue, such as cooking, house chores, or needlework. She also grew to be taller than most girls, and her looks were far from anything that might be considered cute. Xinyan's childhood was rough, and was also affected by discrimination or prejudice by adults all over Liyue. Xinyan began to slowly lose confidence in herself, and felt that she wasn't fit to stay in Liyue Harbor. However, she soon heard a rather odd sound that made her pumped up, and made her feel as she was alive again. When it became clear that this was something that she enjoyed listening to, she began to imitate the sounds with what little she had. Gradually, she would practice it by herself, and listen carefully to copy the tunes it brought. She even made a lyre with a very unique design, based on the instruments that was used to play the sounds she heard. Although she didn't know what it was called, she soon learned that it was from a foreign nation, the land of the Hydroarchon, Fontaine, and they call it rock and roll. Soon after, she finally found something she wants to do on her own, a place where she could express her emotions, a thought of free will, a sense of belonging. It wasn't specifically mentioned how she heard of rock and roll. My personal theory is that visitors from Fontaine arrived at Liyue Harbor and performed during one of Liyue's famous festivals, or maybe during one of their tours throughout Teyvat. Thus how a young Xinyan managed to hear it. There is no mention in Xinyan's voice lines that she actually visited Fontaine, so it is best assumed that she instead heard it performed live at Liyue Harbor. It can also be theorized that she was already skilled in playing stringed instruments in Liyue, and could explain how she easily copied rock and roll by just listening to it. Sometime in the future, maybe we'll be introduced to the famous Iridescence tour that Xinyan told us back in the Labyrinth Warriors event, and would clear up some details as to how rock and roll reached Xinyan's ears. Still, we're interested to hear your opinions on this. What could have been the other ways in which Xinyan learned rock and roll? Comment your thoughts or theories down below. Okay, so back to her story. As Xinyan was continuing her road to becoming a rock and roll star, this type of music wasn't familiar or welcomed in her home nation. This was a great challenge for her, as she needed to be able to attract enough attention to people for it to become more popular. So she increasingly immersed herself more in the world of music, looking for a way to move people's hearts. She broke many an instrument and played till calluses formed on both hands. but in her effort, it was still unsatisfactory to her audience. In her early musical career, she was given harsh comments and bad Rotten Tomato reviews, such as, "Who'd want to listen to this racket?" or "That's unladylike." These criticisms started to get to her, and soon wondered if she should quit rock and roll. In her discouragement, she hiked atop Mount Tianheng and sat there looking down at Liyue Harbor. From there, she had deep thoughts such as considering leaving her home and going someplace where rock and roll is appreciated. However, another voice in her head began to mutter, "But would this not be running away? Would it not be a betrayal of rock and roll spirits of resistance?" As these thoughts mashed inside her head, it took her all night to finally decide what she would do next. The next day, Xinyan looked at the rising sun and took a deep breath. She had come to a decision in which she will continue to play rock and roll and be the flame that could light up Liyue Harbor one day. She started experimenting with the use of fire in her performances to move people, and also add sparks and explosions that will amaze her audience. Despite being a task that is not suitable even for an ordinary person, Xinyan was up to the challenge and continued to practice every single day on top of Mount Tianheng. Soon after, a boiling hot vision appeared before her while practicing. Perhaps it was that the gods themselves had great expectations of this new form of music that would soon grace the 7 nations. Thrilled with knowing that she was given a vision, Xinyan dashed down the mountain and returned to Liyue Harbor. From there, she began her very first official rock and roll concert in Liyue Harbor and played astounding tunes to her audience. Happy and excited, her musical journey begins, with showers of sparks and explosions keeping time. Xinyan's rise to being a rock and roll star was a slow and painful process, but a successful one in the end. As she became used to playing rock and roll, she started to write her thoughts and opinions into her songs, one of which is where Xinyan believes that many adults fail to realize their potential because they are tied down by prejudice, giving into the fear and endless anxiety, resulting in not understanding what life is really about. However, this belief of hers soon invited mockery from the very same adults that watch her performances. They would tell her, "What does this brat know?" Even so, Xinyan did not mind these words. After all, she was already used to receiving the same harsh words and painful criticisms before. Still, she hoped that after her every performance, those adults who listen to her written songs will have a change of heart and break loose of those prejudices that tie them down. Maybe one day, those in her audience will receive some inspiration, or perhaps a change of mood. Perhaps they might find that the real-life troubles that keep them locked down from enjoying the true nature of life are nothing but a storm in a teacup. This is because Xinyan believes that her music of rock and roll is like a seed that could sprout in the hearts of her audience and let them have a sense of resistance. Such is how she continues to do it by playing a type of music that is unwelcomed in her home and resisting the criticisms against her performances. To add as a trivia, rock and roll is a music genre that originated from the southern United States. This could explain Xinyan's accent in the English version. It was said to have debuted in the late 1940s and early 1950s. One famous pioneer of rock and roll was Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who attained popularity in the 1930s and 1940s with her gospel recordings. Years after, it started to combine elements of rhythm and blues, jazz, and country music with the addition of electric instruments. This form of music is mostly associated with self-liberation, self-expression, and transgression, and is widely known for its energetic performances, catchy melodies, and often insightful lyrics. At that time, these musicians didn't necessarily think of themselves as rock musicians, but it is now a fact that they established the roots of rock music. Today, rock and roll music has branched out from its early days, and now features subgenres such as classic rock, punk rock, indie rock, ska, rap rock, funk rock, and math rock. This could have influenced Xinyan's character story, seeing as how she is the pioneer of her music, and is looking to shape rock and roll's popularity among the people of Liyue. She helps promote self-expression and transgression with her energetic performances and emerging music genre. Because Xinyan doesn't know how an official rock and roll instrument is made, She made her own based on the rock and roll instruments that were imported from Fontaine, before adding additional modifications based on personal understanding. To serve as an example, she mounted a crescent-shaped axe blade on the tail end of the lyre, which explains why her instrument looks like a weapon instead of, an instrument. She believes that having this modification will be to serve as a weapon in a pinch whenever she is in danger. When she finally acquired a vision, she connected it to her instrument, allowing it to spew flames and sparks while performing. She also added a self-destruct modification for her instrument, so that if ever her lyre falls into the wrong hands, it will explode and bring out flames. So before anyone thinks of trying to steal her instrument, think first before you act. The rest of the modifications go on, and they are too numerous to count. This explains why Xinyan's instrument is so unique, that even its sound profile is also special. To make it final, she came up with a few ideas on how to name it, such as the Fire Lyre, the Jade Breaker, or the Hill Stealer. If you were interested in what it will look like in real life, except of course the modifications, it was actually based on a traditional Chinese string instrument known as ruan. The ruan may have a history of over 2,000 years. The earliest form may be the Qin pipa, which was then developed into a ruanchuan named after Ruanxian, and was then shortened to ruan. A ruan is a lute with a fretted neck, a circular body, and 4 strings. Its 4 strings were formerly made of silk, but since the 20th century, they have been made of steel to serve as flatwood for the lower strings. The modern ruan, which is what Xinyan's instrument looks like, has 24 frets with 12 semitones on each string, which has greatly expanded its range from the previous 13 frets. The frets are commonly made of ivory or, in recent times, of metal mounted on wood. The metal frets produce a brighter tone as compared to the ivory frets. It is sometimes called ruanxin, particularly in Taiwan. The ruan is now most commonly used in Chinese opera and the Chinese orchestra, where it belongs to the plucked string or chordophone section. There's also another instrument with Xinyan that we missed in our past video. It's her drum that is attached to her back. This instrument is a reference to the talking drum that originated from West Africa. It is like this hourglass-shaped drum that is used to mimic the tone and rhythm of human speech, thus could explain why its name is the talking drum. If you're playing as Xinyan, we can clearly hear her drums making little sounds when she walks or sprints. As one of my first characters when I played Genshin, it was a fun little detail added, to say the least. However, there were times that it got annoying, but hearing how Xiangling mains used to put up with her loud bell in the early patches, Xinyan's drum sounds were at least tolerable. Now let's talk about how the characters in Liyue think about Xinyan, and who she considers as her friends. At first, because of Xinyan's fierce look, she finds it hard to make friends. Even when she has done nothing at all, Xinyan is often suspected of wrongdoing, purely because of her fierce and villainous appearance. While Xinyan didn't much care about how other people saw her, she soon thought that it wasn't a nice thing to scare others or make trouble for them, so she looked for ways to make a change. When she wakes up in the morning, she would look at herself in the mirror and massage her face with her fingers to stretch and relax her eyes a little. She would even practice on how to smile, and even copy some impressions that might go off as friendly. In time, she managed to make some friends, and they're the ones that she can rely on, even if they're only few in number. Xinyan believes that this is enough and plenty as well. One of her closest friends, Xiangling, is one of the few exceptions with whom Xinyan can speak most freely. She visits Xiangling at the Wanmin restaurant to not only converse with her, but also for musical inspiration. Whenever Xiangling is researching new recipes and want people to taste her dishes, others will run for the hills, including Chongyun and Xingju, who are afraid of Xiangling's dishes. But not Xinyan. She intentionally eats all the experimental dishes that Xiangling cooks, and amid the taste bud explosions that results from the innovative flavors, inspiration flows into Xinyan's mind. Whenever Xinyan tries a dish, she compliments Xiangling by saying, "Tell you what, Xiangling, that dish rocked." This shows an example of their genuine friendship that would continue for many more years to come. Though Xinyan considers this to be the highest praise, Xiangling finds it a little hard to be happy about such ratings. Another one of Xinyan's friends is Beidou. According to Beidou, she always invites Xinyan to perform on her ship, despite not sharing her taste in music. But because her crew loves her performances, she allows Xinyan to come overboard the Alcor and keep the crew happy. At one point, Xinyan even wrote a song for them, and while joining in their expeditions, it gave Xinyan some inspiration. Moving on, it's not entirely sure if she's also her friend, but it seems that Keqing supports her good music and respects Xinyan's fame as a rock and roll musician. While we haven't seen some interaction between them, we could guess that Keqing could have attended one of Xinyan's performances. On another note, not all are entertained by Xinyan's music. At one point, Zhang Li of the Wangsheng funeral parlor invited Xinyan to perform in one of the funerary rites. Because of the rumors surrounding Xinyan saying that she is a great musician and performer, Zhang Li could have assumed that her music would be a great fit for a funerary rite. However, as soon as Xinyan started to perform in front of the weeping crowd, they were not entertained and questioned Zhang Li's ability in organizing a proper funerary rite. Imagine a rock and roll song being played at your funeral. Wouldn't that be an ironic way to mourn someone's death? After that, it can be assumed that Xinyan was never called by Zhang Li ever again. There are also Chongyun and Xingqiu, who at first avoided Xinyan's concerts because of the hot atmosphere her performances give and the loud noise it emits. However, there was a time when Xingqiu decided to bring Chongyun with him to see one of her performances. From Xinyan's point of view, Chongyun had said some words to her but couldn't hear them over the music. Before she knew it, Chongyun climbed up the stage and started singing and rocking beside Xinyan. It is never mentioned why the two suddenly attended Xinyan's performances. I guess they wanted to try something new, or maybe Chongyun lost control of himself, knowing that he gets heated up in certain situations. Now there's one fun story about Xinyan's interaction with a fan of hers named Yunjin. Back when we first made a video about Xinyan, Yunjin wasn't playable yet. We didn't even know what her appearance looked like. All we knew at that time was that she was a prestigious dancer and singer at the Heyu Tea House. Now going back to the story, Yunjin was invited by Xinyan to her place as a guest. When Yunjin was looking for it, it was thanks to Xinyan that she hadn't encountered any more problems finding it. As Xinyan opened the door to her house, Yunjin saw that it was spick and span. The windows were clean, and the home ornaments were handmade and immaculately arranged. The cooktop was still moist, indicating that someone has been cooking not long before, and there was half-sewn cloth by the bedside that looked much like the decorations Xinyan wore during her performances. Yunjin was absolutely stunned, because this was like a room of some refined lady of reputable upbringing, with little traces of rock and roll to be found. Because Yunjin is a prestigious dancer, singer, and brewer who works at the Heyu Tea House, and is a famous performer of the Yunhan opera troupe, Xinyan was quite worried that this fan of hers would find the difference between their impression of rock and roll and this reality too conflicting. Unexpectedly, Yunjin's visit would make her support and fandom only grow more intense for Xinyan after their meeting. Despite Yunjin's elders warning her not to attend to any more of Xinyan's shows, Yunjin believes that this is because her elders don't want to accept anything new. Still, she continues to attend Xinyan's gigs, rocking out every week. This could have also established a friendship between them. This is further proved when Yunjin and Xinyan appeared together during the second Lantern Rite event. To be honest with you guys, I smiled a lot when I finally saw them together in a cutscene. From just reading her name in Xinyan's story before to now appearing with her in the Lantern Rite, it was very wholesome and heartwarming. Now on to the final one. This might be hard to believe, but Xinyan would also inspire some notable characters like Yan Fei to start their own musical career. It is stated that Yan Fei once attended one of Xinyan's performances and was amazed by her music. She later became interested in becoming a musician, but soon realized that learning how to play an instrument is hard and can be complicated. As a final decision, she would just become a rapper once she retires. Imagine if she retired early. Xinyan and Yan Fei would make for a great performance. After Xinyan received her vision, she became more and more used to using flames and explosions in her performances. While her audience loved this addition, some people would consider this harmful to the city. Because of how Xinyan would often burn her impromptu stage after a concert, the Millith thought this to be harmful to the people of Liyue. It could spread fire to the other houses and even cause accidents to her audience. So the Millith charged her with a fire code violation and finally tried to find ways to stop Xinyan from staging her performances. Unfortunately, Xinyan was still continued to find a place to perform, set up a stage with speed, and begin a loud night with her audience. With the Millith being unable to stop her from performing, some of them eventually liked rock and roll music. They even became her loyal fans in the process, and instead of stopping her from performing, they joined in with the audience, jumping up and down as they enjoyed Xinyan's music. One notable Millith guard is Kun. Kun can be found patrolling in the lower part of Liyue Harbor. He recently became one of Xinyan's fans, and even secretly helped her to find places to perform. Kun would tell Xinyan about the Millith's patrol plans, thus how Xinyan was able to avoid their eyes and perform a concert with ease. Eventually, with the lack of results that Xinyan's performances caused harm to anyone, the Millith gave up. With Xinyan winning the subsequent Battle of Wits, she can finally be able to continue her rise to stardom. Now as for Xinyan's constellation, it is named Phila Ignium, which translates to strings of fire. The Latin word, Phila, means wires in English, and Ignium, which means fires, thus why it means strings of fire. The name of her level 6 constellation, Rockin' in a Flaming World, is a reference to Neil Young's song named Rockin' in the Free World, which is considered one of his best songs. Before ending the video, I want to share some personal thoughts about her appearances in these past events. We first officially met her during the Moonchase Festival, but this was only for a brief time. However, it soon paved the way for many more of her screen time, as she was later featured in a limited event with Child. A lot of us, including myself, didn't expect her to be featured in Inazuma out of all places. Still, her interactions with Sarah and Child were really enjoyable, and I never really imagined her conversing with the Fatui Harbinger and a Tengu General of the Shogunate. While it is true that the Labyrinth Warriors was an event that wanted to highlight Child's personality and point out Scaramouche's future plans with the Gnosis, Xinyan being there was just pure happiness, and it made me love her character even more. Helping Xinyan in Inazuma seemed to be rather new and unexpected, and I kinda enjoy this concept of having different characters from separate nations share some interactions and be featured in events. That is if the story will also be good and not feel forced. And I think that's it. Now I want to hear from you guys from the comments. Let me know what are your thoughts about the latest Lantern Ride. Have you enjoyed the event so far? And which characters would you want to share an interaction with in the future? Share it down below. Thank you very much for watching, and if you think it deserves one, give this video a like. Once again, my name is Clementine, and as usual, until the next one, be safe and stay tuned.